We were in Murraysville, PA. This was Detective Trial 1 for WCOTC. You would enter here, and your start line is right here at the edge of the carpet. It was a wet, snowy day, so that way you could come in, dry off your feet on the edge of the rug, and then you would start the actual search right here on the edge of the carpet. So you came up these stairs, and all of this was in play. Okay? And you would encounter your first hide right here. It was up underneath the middle of this ledge. This one was really fun to watch the dogs work out. They were actually catching it here on this table, and catching it here on the edge, as well as the front, and on top of here, and then they would work it back to source here, and go underneath of this table to catch that hide. So that was a cool one to see them work out. This hide was hide number 2 that you'd encounter, and the dogs were actually catching it here in this corner, and then they would work that one back to source for the most part. And then your third hide was right here on the bench, okay? And it was really interesting to watch the dogs work these 3 problems in this space. Most of the dogs would get 2 of the 3 hides, boom, boom. And then the third hide, they would kind of have to spend a little bit more time in this space to figure out, or they'd have to go out to the exterior and then come back in and get it, or kind of take a second lap around the room and double check the area to get that hide. So there was definitely a lot going on in this space for them to work out those problems. This was your exterior to come on outside. And your exterior ran along this crack here, and there were cones out here earlier this morning. And it came along this crack here. And up here along the edge behind the bench. And these doors were not in play. Otherwise, everything was in play, and your exterior space was blank. We did have probably about 3, maybe 4 false alerts out here in this space. So your challenge out here was having a blank exterior, coming out, understanding that there was nothing out here to find, and getting back inside without calling a false alert. We would then continue on down the hallway. And this hallway was blank. This was your first room that you encountered. And coming in here, you had a threshold hide. Right here in this bookcase. And it was right down here low, tucked back in the back of this bookcase. Every dog that made it to this room got that hide. It was really cool to see them come shooting into this room and nail that hide. And that was the only hide in this room. The rest of the room was blank. That was your threshold hide. This door, when you did the search, was shut. Our score room's in there. Busy at work. This door was shut too. Same deal, our score room was at work. So then this was your next room that you came into. Lots of stuff in here. Okay. This room was also blank. So could you come into a second space, this one an interior, and decide that nothing was in here? Your dog was done, there's nothing to be found, and move on. Could you not dwell in the space and spend too much time in here? As you came down these steps and transitioned to the next space, you had a hide right here. So it's a little bit of a transition area, and it's a corner. So a lot of dogs blasted down these steps to shoot into that next room, and they blasted past this bench, or they didn't go into the corner and they didn't get this bench. So quite a few dogs missed this hide. Some handlers came back and got this hide, but if your dog blasted through the space, or your dog's not good at checking corners, or doesn't have value for corners, or isn't good at checking transitions or thresholds, a lot of people miss this hide. Thankfully, some of them did come back, but some of them did not, and they missed this hide. So I would watch that when you're doing detective searches, because all of them are going to go from an exterior to an interior and have those transition phases. So this is your next area. Nice big room. You have 1 hide on this chair right here as you came into the room. And pretty much everybody got that hide. The only problem that this played is as the day went on, this hide started to pool and collect under this table. Thankfully, none of the handlers called it, and all of the dogs worked it out and got to this chair, and then the handlers left that table alone, and nobody called me false alarms on that table. far in on the table. And this was a commonly missed hide. A lot of dogs went into this room back here over there on the left-hand side. They would then shoot out of the room here, and they would shoot past this table. Or they'd want to go into this room and they'd shoot into this room and they wouldn't check this table, or the dogs would go to come back to this table, but the handlers were coming out of here and they were coming so quickly that they would push the dogs off that table. So this was actually a commonly missed hide, this table here, and as soon as I would tell the handlers that it was back here for their hide at the end of their NQ or their DQ, depending upon what happened, they would come back and get this hide really quickly. Last space, one hide in this room, and inaccessible. It was in the center of these tables, right down here. And most of the dogs got this hide without a problem, and they were diving underneath of this table and spinning around underneath it here and crawling under here. Some of them were crawling underneath of this chair and trying to get to it. Some of them were coming in here and trying to get to it. I did have, as the day went on, the odor started coming back over this way by these vents and channel along these vents. And one or two dogs showed interest back here, and then they would leave it. I think we had one false alert back here, but otherwise the dogs left this alone and came back over and worked this out. So this search, you had 8 hides total. You had 11 minutes, and you guys can see that you kind of had the challenge of, can you cover your area, not dwell too long in a space because it's kind of a long space versus having like a wide space. So depending upon the dog you have, if you have a more methodical dog, you might not be able to go back to the start. You have some transition spaces, you have some threshold hides, you had 2 blank areas, an interior and an exterior. And so could you get through all of that? We had 5 dogs qualify out of 17. So good job, guys.